The child who knew too much. The Ridgewood Murders, 1998. Ridgewood, Ohio, in 1998, was the kind of town people moved to because they believed it was safe. Tree-lined streets, wide front porches, Friday night football games under bright stadium lights, children riding bikes until the street lights flickered on. It was a town built on routine, on familiarity, on the quiet confidence that nothing truly bad could happen here. Violent crime was rare. Murders were almost unheard of. In Ridgewood, people believed safety came from knowing your neighbors, from recognizing every face, from trusting the people who lived just a few doors down. But in the spring of 1998, that trust would be tested, not by a hardened criminal, not by a stranger passing through, but by a voice no one was prepared to take it seriously. The voice of an 8-year-old boy, a child who would describe a murder before police ever arrived at the scene, a child whose warning would be dismissed, and a child whose words would later haunt an entire town. 8-year-old Eli Carter was not the kind of child teachers worried about. He didn't cause trouble. He didn't fight. He didn't talk back. If anything, he was almost too quiet. Teachers described him as observant, the kind of student who noticed details others missed, the child who stared at the clock not because he was bored, but because he was counting time. Neighbors described him as shy, the boy who stayed close to his mother at block parties, the boy who waved, but rarely spoke first. But to his mother, Laura Carter, something about Eli felt wrong. Not dangerous, not broken, changed. Earlier that year, Eli's father had left the family. The separation was sudden, painful, and confusing in a way only a child could experience. There were arguments Eli wasn't meant to hear, late-night conversations behind closed doors, raised voices, long silences. Then one day, his father was simply gone. No long explanation. No clear goodbye that made sense to an 8-year-old. After that, Eli became different. Not angry, not rebellious, just watchful. He began sitting by windows for long stretches of time, sometimes for so long that Laura would forget he was there. He watched cars pass, count how many times the same vehicle went by, note which neighbors left early, which ones came home late. He paid attention to details adults never noticed. He listened when adults spoke quietly, when voices dropped in tone, when conversations stopped suddenly when he entered a room. He learned to read tension, silence, the things people didn't say. Laura believed it was grief. A child tried to regain control in a world that had suddenly changed. A child trying to make sense of loss by paying attention. She told herself it was normal. That would pass. That time would heal it. But years later, when investigators looked back at Eli's behavior, they used a different word. They didn't call it grief. They called it vigilance. The kind that comes from a child who no longer feels fully safe. The kind that develops when a child learns, too early, that bad things can happen quietly. The kind that makes a child watch, because somewhere inside, they believe something bad is coming. 3 houses down from the Carters lived Thomas Hale, age 42. In Ridgewood, Thomas was the kind of man everyone liked. He volunteered at the local church every Sunday, helped neighbors fix their cars without expecting payment, watched houses when people went on vacation. He smiled easily, spoke calmly, never raised his voice. To the town, Thomas Hale was harmless, reliable, people said, kind. The kind of man you trust with your spare key. But children notice things adults often overlook. One evening in March 1998, as the sky darkened over Ridgewood, Eli sat in his usual spot by the front window. He had learned early to observe, to watch, to notice patterns. And on this particular night, something about Thomas Hale caught his attention. Thomas's trunk was open. The man was bending, lifting, adjusting. Eli's small eyes traced the object carefully. It was not groceries. It was not a tool. It was long, heavy, wrapped in a dark tarp. Eli's chest tightened. Thomas looked around slowly, carefully, scanning the quiet street, checking that no one else was watching. Then, as if sensing Eli's gaze, Thomas turned. Their eyes met, and Thomas smiled. It was the same smile he used at church, the same smile he used when helping neighbors. But to Eli, it was not a smile of kindness. It was a smile of recognition, of knowing, of something that made Eli shrink back from the window. For a brief, terrifying moment, Eli realized that the man everyone trusted might not be the man everyone thought he was. He felt fear, sharp, immediate, and heavy, a fear that clung to his chest, a fear he didn't yet have words for. Eli didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. And for the first time, he understood something adults had never taught him. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones you should fear the most. That night, Eli did not sleep. He twisted and turned in his bed, his small hands clutching his sheets. Every shadow in the room seemed larger than it should be. Every creak of the old floorboards sounded like a warning. At 2:17 a.m., he got out of bed. He went quietly to his mother's room. Laura Carter was startled when she saw him standing in the doorway, trembling. "What is it, Eli?" she asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. Eli could barely speak. His words tumbled out, low and urgent. "I saw a woman on the floor. Blood everywhere. The living room. It's all broken." He shivered. His eyes were wide. His small frame shook as if it carried something too heavy for his body. Laura reached for him, pulling him close. "It's okay, honey. It's just a dream," she whispered. "Just a nightmare. That's all." But even as she spoke, she noticed a detail in his voice. The way he described the room. The way he described the carpet soaked red. The position of the furniture. The precise placement of the body. It was too vivid, too structured, too specific. Eli looked up at her with seriousness no 8-year-old should carry. "Someone is going to die, Mom," he said. Laura swallowed hard. Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe it was a dream, a product of fear, of imagination, of his father leaving. But something in Eli's eyes told her otherwise. This was not a dream. This was a warning, and it was the kind of warning adults often ignore. On the morning of March 18th, 1998, Ridgewood was quiet. The sun rose over familiar streets, the smell of freshly cut grass in the air, children heading off to school, neighbors sipping coffee on porches. But in one home, the quiet was shattered. Ridgewood police responded to a 911 call just after 7 a.m. The caller was a neighbor who had noticed something unusual. Marissa Cole, 34, hadn't answered her door. Officers arrived quickly. The neighborhood watched from the edges of their driveways, murmuring to one another. In a town like Ridgewood, a 911 call was almost always routine. Not today. Inside Marissa's home, the scene was chilling. Her living room was still, pristine in its normal arrangement, except for the one thing that didn't belong, her body. Marissa lay sprawled across the carpet, her life ended by blunt force trauma. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no doors forced open. Investigators immediately concluded that she had let her killer inside. It was a crime that felt personal, quiet, calculated, the kind that made people look at the neighbors they passed every day with suspicion. Meanwhile, at the Carter house, Eli watched the morning news. Marissa Cole's photograph filled the screen. He went silent. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. But his mother noticed a tightness in his small shoulders, the way his hands clenched. Then he said it, in the calm, terrifying way only a child who had already seen it could. "That's the woman from my dream." Laura Carter froze. Same room, same position. Every detail matched what he had described the night before. This was the moment that Laura finally stopped dismissing her son's words. Fear replaced doubt. Concern replaced disbelief. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that the nightmare Eli had described had not been a nightmare at all. It had been a warning. Laura contacted the police. The case was assigned to Detective Raymond Foster, a veteran investigator. Eli told him about the tarp, the trunk, the neighbor. Detective Foster listened carefully, but he was skeptical. Thomas Hale had an alibi. He claimed he was visiting family in another county. Phone records supported it. Relatives confirmed it. Thomas Hale was officially cleared. The case stalled As the days turned into weeks, Ridgewood began to feel different. The streets that were once safe now seemed quieter. Neighbors glanced at each other with suspicion. Children were called inside earlier. Front doors were locked, even during the day. The police were under pressure. A young woman had been killed. Another could be next, and the town demanded answers. Investigators turned their focus to anyone who might have a motive. Derek Mills, the ex-boyfriend, Marissa Cole's former boyfriend. Their relationship had ended poorly. Arguments in public, jealousy in private, messages left on answer machines that hinted at anger and resentment. Police questioned Derek for hours. Every detail was examined, every alibi checked, and yet there was nothing, no evidence, no witness, no smoking gun. He was cleared, but the damage was done. The whispers had started. Some townspeople quietly assumed guilt anyway. Paul Renner, the reclusive neighbor. Then there was Paul Renner, a man who rarely interacted with anyone, known for strange habits, for wandering the streets at odd hours, for late-night activity that no one could explain. Police searched his home, his garage, even his yard. Inside, they found disturbing drawings, abstract figures, dark shapes, images that unsettled even seasoned detectives. But there was no evidence linking him to Marissa Cole's death. No fingerprints. No DNA. No witness placed him near the crime scene. He too was cleared. And yet, the town whispered. Rumors spread quickly, like wildfire across Ridgewood's quiet streets. Innocent men were quietly labeled guilty. And in the corner of every adult's mind, fear grew. If Derek wasn't the killer, and Paul wasn't the killer, then who could it be? One small boy already had an idea. Eli Carter. He said it wasn't either of them. But no one listened. The first warning had been ignored. The second would go unheeded as well. 2 weeks after Marissa Cole's murder, Ridgewood was already on edge. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones. Children were brought indoors earlier than usual. Even familiar faces felt distant, almost cautious. Then, the news came. Angela Moore, 29, had disappeared. She lived on the other side of town. Her circle of friends didn't overlap with Marissa's. Her life seemed ordinary, safe. But safety, Ridgewood was learning, was an illusion. Police launched a search. Volunteers combed parks, alleys, and empty lots. By late evening, the worst was confirmed. Angela's body had been found near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The scene was grim, blunt force trauma. No signs of forced entry at her home. The furniture was untouched, the doors locked, as if she had let her killer inside willingly. The method was disturbingly familiar. The precision, the quiet brutality, the control over the victim. It mirrored Marissa's death in every meaningful way. For Detective Raymond Foster, the realization was chilling. We're not dealing with an isolated incident anymore, he would later say. This is a pattern, a serial offender. Someone who's planning carefully, watching, waiting. Back at the Carter house, Eli watched the news coverage. He saw Angela's photograph on the screen. Her smiling face. Her ordinary life. Her place in the town that thought itself safe. He turned to his mother, his small frame tense, voice steady but low. It's the same man. Laura Carter's heart sank. Fear clawed at her chest. The nightmares, the warnings, the quiet observations, all of it had been real. And yet there was still no proof. No evidence linked any suspect to both deaths. No physical trace, no fingerprints, no witness. Ridgewood was trapped in fear and uncertainty, and the boy who had seen it coming was still ignored. By late March 1998, Ridgewood was a town on edge. Detective Raymond Foster had reviewed the Marissa Cole case countless times. Each page of the file, each witness statement, each minor detail. He had combed through it all, and yet the answer remained elusive. Then came the disappearance of Angela Moore. 2 women. 2 similar deaths. No forced entry. Same quiet, controlled brutality. Patterns began to emerge. Patterns that led Foster back to one man, Thomas Hale. At first glance, Hale was harmless. The kind of man everyone trusted. The kind of man you'd leave your spare key with. But Detective Foster dug deeper. Out-of-state records painted a different picture. A domestic violence charge from nearly a decade earlier. A restraining order filed by a former partner. And, most chilling of all, reports of a woman who had disappeared mysteriously. Someone Hale had been connected to years before moving to Ridgewood. The picture was troubling, suspicious, and horrifying. But there was a problem. There was no physical evidence. No fingerprints. No DNA. No eyewitnesses. And Hale denied everything. There was no confession. Detective Foster knew one thing. Hale was hiding something. Whether it was fear, manipulation, or cunning, Foster couldn't yet say. The town didn't know it yet, but the man they smiled at, waved to, and trusted with their homes was now under serious suspicion. And in the Carter home, Eli remained quiet. He watched. He noticed. He had seen something adults couldn't. And the detective, for the first time, began to listen. But suspicion alone was not enough. Not in Ridgewood. Not in 1998. The files were open. The questions were endless. And the killer, I remained free. By the fall of 1998, Ridgewood had changed. The streets were the same. The porches still creaked under old rocking chairs. Children still rode their bikes. But the innocence of the town had vanished. The sense of safety, long taken for granted, had been replaced by suspicion and fear. The police had investigated every lead they could find. Derek Mills, Marissa's ex, had been cleared. Paul Renner, the reclusive neighbor, had no evidence tying him to crimes. Thomas Hale, the trusted neighbor, had suspicious history, but no physical proof, no witness, no confession. And so the case files grew cold. The deaths of Marissa Cole and Angela Moore were officially labeled unsolved. No arrests, no charges, no closure. Detective Raymond Foster never stopped thinking about the cases. Every detail haunted him. The controlled nature of the killings, the lack of forced entry, the eerie similarity between the two victims. But the clock was running out. Leads grew stale. Witnesses moved on. And the suspect, Thomas Hale, quietly remained in Ridgewood, living a life that appeared normal, blending once more into the background of the town he had once charmed. By 1999, Hale moved out of state. His destination is unclear. His life seemingly erased from Ridgewood streets. The case became another file in the archives, folders stacked on shelves, notes fading, photographs yellowing. Yet in the Carter home, the memory lingered. Eli Carter, the boy who had seen it first, the boy who had warned them, the boy whose observations had been ignored. He grew up carrying something heavier than most children could imagine. The knowledge that the person responsible for two brutal deaths had walked freely through a town that trusted too easily. Ridgewood learned a lesson it would never forget. Some evil hides in plain sight. Some warnings go unheard. And sometimes, justice is never fully served. The Ridgewood murders of 1998 remain officially unsolved. As the years passed, Eli Carter changed. He stopped sitting by the windows for hours. He stopped whispering warnings to his mother. He stopped speaking about dreams that no adult seemed to believe. He became like other children, outwardly ordinary, quiet in school, smiling when asked, blending in with classmates who had no idea the burden he carried. But inside, Eli never forgot. He remembered the details adults had dismissed, the long nights of watching the street, the dark smile of a neighbor no one suspected, the images of Marissa Cole and Angela Moore that replayed in his mind, unshakable. Years later, when the case remained unsolved, Detective Raymond Foster reflected in a recorded interview. We had a child telling us something important, and we didn't listen enough. The weight of those words lingered, because in Ridgewood, in 1998, warnings were ignored, voices were dismissed, and a child who saw the truth was left unheard. Eli grew up carrying a memory no child should have to bear, a memory of danger no one else recognized, a knowledge that the person responsible for two deaths had walked freely through his town, unnoticed, unchecked. And Ridgewood would never forget either. More than 2 decades have passed, and the Ridgewood murders of 1998 remain unsolved. No one has ever been convicted. No one has ever been officially named. The case files gathered dust in a corner of the police archives, a reminder of lives lost and questions left unanswered. Some in Ridgewood quietly believed Thomas Hale was responsible. Others insist there was never enough evidence to point a finger. And some, still, refuse to talk about it all. What is certain, undeniable, is this: a child saw something adults overlooked. A warning was given. 2 women lost their lives. A community's sense of safety was shattered. Trust became fragile. Doors stayed locked longer, and neighbors no longer waved so freely. And the boy who saw it all, Eli Carter, grew up carrying the knowledge that no child should have to bear. He learned that adults do not always listen, even when the truth is staring them in the face. In Ridgewood, 1998 is remembered not just for murders, but for the child who tried to stop them. A child who saw what no one else saw. A child whose voice went unheard. A child whose warning came too soon. And the truth remains unsolved.